Okay, and now we will be learning our other property of exponents, which is the division property of exponents. We have x divided by x to the 8th divided by x to the 3rd, okay? Now you're going to do the same thing. You're going to combine it into one x, okay? Here's how you divide. Take out the x, whatever's the smaller power, like it'd be x to the 3rd. You take that out and you just subtract it from the other side. So 8 minus 3 is 5, x to the 5th power. Now if you're wondering how does that work, well, x to the 8th, I make a division line. That would be 8 factors of x. Now x to the 3rd would be 3 factors of x. And we cancel out every factor I have on top, I cancel it on bottom. But we can't cancel those because we don't have anything on bottom. So that's 5 x's. So x is x to the power of 5. Okay, now x to the 10th divided by x to the 2nd. You take out the smaller. The smaller one's going to be on the bottom today, I think. I'm pretty sure it will be, yeah. So you minus then 2, and that's x to the 8th. Take out the smaller x. Always take out the smaller one. Whether it's on top or bottom, you take it out and subtract the other side. So that'd be x to the 3rd. And then m to the 8th divided by m to the 2nd. Take out that, minus it 2. 8 minus 2 is 6, so it'd be m to the 6th. Okay. X to the 16th divided by x to the 2nd. You take out your smaller and subtract it from the other side. 16 minus 2 is 14. And that's how do you divide exponents. You just subtract from there. Okay, now we're going to simplify some expressions with exponents. Now this can be hard if you let it be. Okay, here's how the problem looks for those of you on virtual. In parentheses we have 5x to the 3rd and y to the 4th, and then after parentheses we have a second power. And we have a times, and we have 7 divided by x to the 4th, okay? Now here's what I first do. I put in the operator. Remember, don't put it on the exponent. Now, what you need to do, if you see a division line, and it's all multiplication, you need to extend that division line so it goes through the whole problem. Just trust me on this, okay? Now here's what we're going to do. We're going to make the 2 lines just like the other day. Now just look on the top, okay? You treat the top and the bottom as 2 separate places. So your number base is on top. Think back to the last assignment. You have a base 5 and a base 7, okay? The other numbers are exponents. So base 5 times base 7. And then the variable bases, you have x and y. Now go to the bottom. Okay. You don't have any number bases on the bottom, you just have a variable base of x. Okay. Now apply your exponents. Okay, so it's like you list the top and the bottom separately. So 5 is to the 1st, but that's in a parentheses, so we need to distribute the 1 to that 2 out there. So 1 times 2 is 2, so that's 5 to the 2nd. Now the 7's to the 1st, but that's not in a parentheses, so we just put the 1st down on the 7. Now x, yes there's 2 x's, but we don't add because one's on top, one's on bottom, so we do them separately. Now if there was 2 x's across the top, I'd put that little plus sign, but there's not. So x to the 3rd, I distribute 3 to 2, and that's 6. Now the y, this is my only factor of y on top, it's to the 4th, but that's in a parentheses, so we need to distribute 4 to 2. It means 4 times 2, that'd be 8. Okay, then the x on the bottom is just to the 4th, no parentheses, no anything. Now you need to stop here. You can't ignore this. You have a 5 on top. Do you have one on bottom? No, you don't. You have a 7 on top. Do you have it on bottom? No, you don't. You have an x on top. Do you have a base x on bottom? Yes, you do. So you take out the x of the smaller power and subtract that exponent from the other side. So 6 minus 4 is 2. Okay? So it's x to the second. And there's no y on bottom to go with the y on top. Okay, now it's just like yesterday. 5 to the second gets evaluated. 5 times 5 is 25. 7 to the first, that gets evaluated. That's just 7 though. X to the second cannot be evaluated. And y to the 8th cannot be evaluated. Now we don't have anything on bottom. You have to start looking for things. If you have things that are on bottom, they need to go on bottom, but we crossed out the only thing we had on bottom, so yeah. Now, do not leave those two in the front unmultiplied, because you can simplify by taking 25 times 7, and that's 175. So the answer is 175 times x to the second times y to the 8th. Okay, next problem. We have one big parentheses, and inside that parentheses you have a division line. On top of the division line you have 8x to the third, y to the second. Under the division line you have 5xy. After the parentheses you have a second power. Now, look above the division line, okay? Put your operators in, okay? And on bottom too. So let's just talk about the top first. Remember, do the top of the division and the bottom of the division separately, and you're going to make the list on top and bottom. Okay, so on top, the number base is 8. Don't put that crap on top. That's on bottom. And you have one variable base of x and one variable base of y. Some of you are like, oh, ain't there two x's? No, one's on top, one's on bottom, so you can't put them together. You can't combine them together when they're on top, bottom. Okay, and on bottom we have a number base of 5, and then a letter base of x and a letter base of y. Okay, so let's talk about this. So 8, so we have 8 to the power of 1. Okay, now it is all that's in parentheses, so everything I put here gets multiplied by 2 out there. So it's 8 to the second. Now the x on top is to the third, 3 times 2 is 6. And the y is to the second, 2 times 2 is 4. Now let's talk the bottom. 5 to the 1, but that also is in parentheses, so you need to be taking the 1 times the 2. Even the bottoms, if the bottom's in parentheses. X to the 1, 1 times 2, 2. Y to the 1, 1 times 2, 2. Now, you need to cross things out if you can. You have an 8 on top. Do you have one on bottom? No. You have a base x on top, and you have it on bottom. So you get rid of the smaller of the exponents and subtract it to the top, and that would be 4. Okay. Same with the y's. You got y on top and bottom, so you get rid of the smaller power, subtract it from top. 4 minus 2 is 2. Now, if the smaller one's on top, you cross it off the top and subtract it to the bottom. That's how that works. Now, what can you evaluate? 8 to the second. That'd be 8 times 8. That'd be 64. Go across the top first. X to the fourth. Okay, you can't evaluate x to the fourth. The y was to the second. You can't evaluate the y to the second. 5 to the second you evaluate, and you put it on bottom because that is where it lays. Okay. Now you're like, do you divide 64 and 25? No. You would only divide those if they divide it, but if it's a decimal, leave it. Okay. Don't second PRB equal it. If it's a decimal, leave it. Okay. You're like, well, what do you do if it's a whole number? Then you cross them out and put that whole number on top. Okay, but just leave it. So you don't multiply them, that means divide them, but if it's a decimal, let's just leave it in fraction form. Okay, next one. 6 to the power of 3 times 6 to the second power, and then a line, and then under the line we have 6 to the third power. Now be careful on this. It's not a hard problem, but the 2 lines. You already have all your operators in. So on top you have a base 6. Now since there's 2 of them on top, we put a plus sign. Okay. And we also have a base 6 on bottom. So again, we list the top and the bottom separately, but there's only one of them on bottom. So the top, well, the 6 on the left is to the third. Don't multiply because it's not in parentheses. The other 6 on top is to the second, so we would be taking 3 plus 2. That would be 6 to the fifth. Okay, so 3 plus 2 gives me a 6 to the fifth. Now on the bottom you have 6 to the third, and that's it. You don't need to distribute. Now, you have a 6 on top. You got one on bottom? Yeah. So we get rid of the smaller one and subtract it from top. You do it with numbers just like you do variables. So 5 minus 3 is 2. So that ends up with 6 to the second power. Okay? That was 6 to the fifth, and then we had 6 third on bottom. We cross out the smaller, subtract it from the higher. 6 to the second gets evaluated, and that's 6 times 6, and that's 36. So that's your answer, 36. Okay, next problem. We have a parentheses. In the parentheses, we have 7x divided by y. And outside, we have a 3. All that's in parentheses. One big parentheses, 7x on top of a division line with y on the bottom, then a 3. Then on the other one, 4x to the third with y, and then x on the bottom, and then a second right there. Okay, 4x to the third with y, division line x to the second. Remember what I said, extend the division line, okay? Extend it throughout the whole problem. You can do that in multiplication. So remember, you list the top and the bottom separately. Put operators there. Remember, not with the exponents. So on top, number bases are a 7 and a 4. So I write 7 times 4. What letter bases do you have on top? You have an X. There's 2 of them, so that would mean I'd add those, this one and this one. And then you have another letter base of Y. But Y doesn't need a plus because it's the only one we got. Now bottom, we have a base of Y and a base of X. No number bases. So let's figure out these exponents. So 7. What power? 7's to the 1. It had an automatic, and it's in parentheses, so 1 gets multiplied by 3. So it'd be 7 to the third. You need to put the 1 there, because if people don't put the 1 there, they'll be taking the 3 times the 7. That's wrong. Okay? You need an exponent there to multiply. Okay, 4. Well, 4's here, it's to the first, it's in a parentheses, so we take 1 times 2. That means all the exponents in here get multiplied by 2. All of them in here get multiplied by 3. So 1 times 2 is 2. Now the x, there's 2 factors of x on top. We will combine those by adding. So 1 times 3 is 3. And this x is to the third, so I take 3 times 2, which would be 6. So 3 plus 6 is 9. So the top x is to the power of 9. Okay, now the y on top, it's to the first, but it's in parentheses, so we need to distribute 1 to 2. 1 times 2 is 2. Okay, now let's talk about the bottom. Now y is to the first, but again, that's still in the parentheses, so we need to distribute the 1 to the 3. 1 times 3 is 3. And on x, put a 1. You need to distribute, that's still in the parentheses. If you look closely, the parentheses is around that x. You need to take the 1 times a 2, and that's 2. Now you got a 7 on top. You got 1 on bottom? Nope. You got a 4 on top. You got 1 on bottom? Nope. You have an x on top. You have 1 on bottom? Sure do. So I have a 9 and a 2. Well, we take out the 2 and then subtract that from the other side. So we end up with x to the 7th on top. Now, this is what I was telling you about. You don't always cross out the bottom one, okay? Y to the second, you have a y on bottom. But y to the second is the lower exponent, so we take it off the top and subtract it to the bottom, and 3 minus 2 is 1, okay? So that y to the 1's on bottom. So we have 7 to the third times 4 to the second times x to the 7th, and then on bottom we have y to the first. So 7 to the third I can evaluate. 7 times 7 times 7. That is 343. So 343. 4 to the second, that would be 4 times 4, and that is 16. X to the 7th, we can't evaluate that. And y to the first, you can't evaluate it, but it goes on bottom. That's where it ended up at. That's where it needs to go at. Okay? Really, if it's to the first, you can just put y without the exponent, but I'll put a first there. Now, we want to multiply these. Okay, the operation we conduct with those is multiplying. We can easily multiply those. 343 times 16 is 5,488. That's your answer. 5,488 times x to the 7th over y to the first. Okay, I got two more. You have a division line. On top of the division line, you have a parentheses. The parentheses is only on the top. Okay? 6a to the third with b, 6a to the third b, and then a fourth outside. Under the division line, you have a to the fifth. So make your lines. So on top, you have a space of 6. Put the operators in. Some people don't need to do that. If you don't think you need to, that's fine. But it's all, that's just to tell you this is all one big multiplication division problem. Okay? That doesn't mean we're not going to add and subtract, because we know we are with exponents, but the operations that start are that. So on top, you have a number base of 6. That's the only number base you have on top. The other numbers are exponents. And then you have a variable base of a, just one of them. You're like, what about that one? That's on the other side. You do the top and bottom separately. And then b. Now on bottom, you just have a base a. That's it. So 6 to the 1, but it's in parentheses, so it's 1 times 4. A to the third, that's in the parentheses, so 3 times 4 is 12. B is to the 1, so 1 times 4 is 4. Now I want you to look at the a on bottom. A lot of people will take 5 times 4, but that would be wrong because the parentheses is not, the a to the fifth is not covered in the parentheses. It's outside, so we just put 5. Again, I'm not taking 5 times 4 because the parentheses is only on top. It's not on bottom, so any exponent on bottom just stays where it's at. Okay, you got 6 on top, you got 1 on bottom? No. You got an a on top, got 1 on bottom? Sure do. So you subtract 5, 12 minus 5 is 7. And you have a b on top, but you don't have 1 on bottom. So, 6 to the 4th, we can evaluate that. That equals 1,296. Aren't I good in my head? Use a calculator, please. A to the 7th, you can't evaluate that because you don't have a number for a. B to the 4th, same situation. And we ended up with nothing on bottom, so that's the answer. Remember, something ends up on bottom, you need to put it on bottom. Okay, our last problem, we have a big parentheses, and inside that we have a division line, 8 a to the 4th. Under the division line, you just have b. Now, after the parentheses closes, you have a second power, times, and then you have another big parentheses with a division line. On top, you have a to the second, and on bottom, you have b to the second, and then you have a second power outside. What I say about a division line, when it's multiplication, you extend it through the whole problem. So, let's talk about the top. Put the operators in. Remember, don't put a times dot there. That's a power. Okay, and that's it. So 8a, so it's just 8 times a, because we will be combining the a's. On bottom, you got b and b. Now, you're going to combine the b's. If you have them, 2 of them on bottom, you combine them there as well. Okay. So 8 to the 1. So you take 1 times 2, that's 2. Okay, now a's, we know we're going to add, so the first a is to the 4th, but we got to take 4 times 2, and that would give me 8. 2 times 2 is 4, so 8 plus 4 is 12. Now remember, we're adding the b's because there was 2 of them on bottom. They get combined by adding on bottom, just like you would on the top. So b to the 1. Okay, so 1 times 2, the parentheses, unlike this problem where it was outside of the parentheses, this is inside. You can clearly see the parentheses is around the b. So 1 times 2 is 2. And if b to the second, that's inside, so it gets multiplied by the 2 right there. 2 times 2 is 4. Or, yeah, 4. So 2 plus 4 is 6, so that would be b to the sixth. Okay? So we have 8 to the second. I can evaluate that. 8 times 8 is 64. That's on top. Also on top we have a to the 12th, but that can't be simplified. B to the 6th on bottom, that can't be simplified, and that's all she wrote, because 64 is the only really number factor, so you don't do that. 64 times a to the 12th over b to the 6th. Remember to put b to the 6th on bottom, because that's where it ended up at. Wherever it ends up is where you put it in the answer.